This is an introduction to the map of airport-related injustice and resistance. So far, 67 cases have been documented and analysed, and this map shows the geographical spread. The main reason for opposition to airport projects is people resisting eviction from their homes and farmland. Airport projects often have ambitious projections for the number of passengers and are frequently related to plans for tourism growth. In Peru, Chinchero Airport, being built to increase the number of visitors to the Machu Picchu area, has projections to handle 8 million passengers a year, but this number of visitors would have serious impacts on the very cultural and ecological treasures that attract people to the Machu Picchu area. In Ireland, a new runway at Dublin Airport, it aims to increase the capacity of the airport to 40 million passengers a year, and already farmers are leaving the area due to construction impacts. In India, a large area has been cleared to make way for construction of Navi Mumbai Airport, which it is projected would ultimately handle 60 million passengers a year. The project has involved eviction of residents from 10 villages from their homes and farmland, and that's impacted about 3,500 families. Another type of development is airports built specifically to serve tourism resorts. The picture shows the airport on Siquijor Island in the Philippines, which is constructed specifically to serve tourism development of resorts and hotels on a large area of the island. We're not just looking at passengers. People are also being displaced for planned cargo airports, and the map includes a cluster in the south of Nigeria, all of which involve bulldozers arriving without warning and destroying people's farmland and crops. In Abudo, bulldozers arrived without warning and began destroying palm plantations, and one man died immediately after witnessing his palm plantation being bulldozed. In Ebonyi, there's a great many reports of threats, intimidation and harassment of people protesting against destruction of their farmland and crops for the airport project, with women being particularly badly affected. The Ogun Airport project is an instance where the land area being earmarked for the project is so large that it begs the question whether an airport of such a scale is actually feasible, or could the project be to some extent a pretext for a land grab. In Ekiti, again, bulldozers arrived without warning and began destroying farmland and crops. And there was a success story in that many of the affected residents managed to start a court case against the project, which eventually succeeded, and the airport project was halted, but came at a tremendous human costs, with 10 farmers dying reportedly of shock. The map includes several examples of Aerotropolis, or airport city projects. That's airports surrounded by commercial and industrial development that's designed to be aviation dependent. There's a list on the left of the slide, and most of these projects are very large scale and involve considerable displacement of people. The map shows a project in Indonesia, Kertajati Airport and Aero City. The rectangular area is the land allocated for the airport itself, with the adjoining area being allocated for the associated Aero City. And in the course of this project, residents of 11 villages were forcibly evicted. As I mentioned, the main reason for people resisting airport projects is loss of their homes and farmlands and livelihoods. And here's a few examples. Another airport city project in Indonesia, New Yogyakarta International Airport, where there were very many documented human rights violations, with people being forcibly evicted from their homes and farmland, documented example of police violence against people resisting eviction and protesting, and also activists being imprisoned. In Kenya, one of the impacts of construction of Isiolo Airport was serious disruption to water supplies, affecting surrounding communities, impacting on their daily lives, and including farming activities. In Nepal, resistance to land acquisition for new Pokhara Airport is an instance where protests escalated to violence between police and protesters, with reports of injuries and also reports of unprovoked attacks on protesters by police. One of many projects in India is Salem Airport, where residents of 4 villages resisting eviction from their farmlands and impacts on their forests and loss of their livelihoods. And there was repression, with an activist being imprisoned. And the airport project is linked with another mega project, a proposed 8-lane highway. Finally, in Vietnam, a long-running land dispute over allocation of farmland for a military airfield escalated in January, when there was a police raid on a community, which resulted in the death of a community leader and also 4 police. The map includes several success stories where airport projects have been stopped, but more frequently success stories are more a case of partial victories, with airport projects being delayed or scaled down. In Bangladesh, a new airport and a large area of wetlands was announced suddenly, triggering enormous protests by people whose livelihoods would have been affected, and the project was very quickly cancelled. But in France, the proposed new Nantes airport was eventually cancelled, but that was only the case after many, many years of protests, which included an alternative community established on the site of the airport, which actually demonstrated more sustainable community and way of living. In China, new Sanya Airport project was delayed and scaled down after environmental organisations raised concerns about the impacts, including on the wildlife habitat of a very rare species of dolphin. In Indonesia, a dispute went on for decades, people wanting fair compensation and rehabilitation for land that was taken for the airport. They resorted to repeated blockades of the runway, and finally, in 2018, there was a partial victory in that some of the people whose land was taken received recognition of their land rights. In India, there were plans for an airport on wetlands in Iranmala, and some of the site was cleared, but a vigorous campaign was successful and the airport project was cancelled. And there's encouraging stories because some of the land that was destroyed is being restored, such as restoring the original route of streams on the wetlands. When airports become operational, there's health impacts of the emissions from aircraft. The picture shows a project in California where communities living near San Bernardino Airport are opposing a massive air cargo facility that would result in high levels of pollution, not just from the aircraft, but from the associated diesel truck traffic, which would have serious negative health impacts, in particular on respiratory conditions. An example of a serious aviation fuel leak is shown here in New Mexico. It went on for several decades, fuels leaking from a military Air Force base. The map shows the plume of how over the years the fuel leak has spread underground, and there are still concerns that it could enter people's water supplies. The map includes several instances of airports built specifically to serve fossil fuel development, and an airport is often an early stage of the infrastructure with such oil developments in order to fly in workers and also deliver equipment. In Timor Leste, Suai Airport opened recently, and there was talk of tourism, but the passenger terminal lies empty, an embarrassing white elephant, but the airport has been used to deliver workers and equipment for the offshore oil project, which, as shown on this slide, is early stage development for offshore oil projects all along the coast with another airport and another airstrip. Two similar projects in Papua New Guinea. Como Airfield was built specifically to serve the country's LNG project. The map shows routes for equipment arriving at the airport and also by ship. During construction, there was a serious landslide that obliterated 2 villages, and even though the landslide was very near the site where aggregate was being extracted for the project, there was never a thorough investigation. And the final picture shows oil equipment being delivered for the LNG project in one of the world's largest cargo aircraft. Similarly, in Uganda, Hoima Airport is under construction, and there's talk of future tourism, but the key purpose is to serve oil development on the coast of Lake Alberta, for example, flying in equipment for a nearby oil refinery. The overhead satellite images shows the airport being constructed, and it's part of an early stage of development for oil projects, including the world's longest heated oil pipeline extending all the way through Tanzania to the coast for exports. And both these projects involve significant displacement of people, and struggles for rehabilitation and fair compensation continue. So that's an outline of the 67 cases documented and analysed, but we're aware of at least 300 cases where there is opposition to airport projects, which merits further investigation. And I do urge you to get involved and contribute information, because there's a very good system for people to get involved in documenting airport projects. And I'll finish with a final slide, which is considering construction in the COVID-19 era. The picture is a fungi airstrip and project camp built specifically to serve the Mozambique LNG project. This area emerged as the epicenter of Mozambique's most serious COVID-19 outbreak. And construction projects were of particular concern because of large volumes of workers travelling into an area, living in cramped conditions, and then often moving away from the area, which makes it very difficult to contain COVID-19, and it makes it very difficult for communities and health officials to contain outbreaks of the virus. And it's important we consider the impacts of construction in the COVID-19 era, because very many projects, including airport construction, are continuing.